You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast presented by SAFFIRE Legal. Workplace Perspective is a regular podcast series for employers and employees focusing on education, training, and the law to help organizations of all sizes develop and maintain successful workplace relationships. The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective do not necessarily reflect those of SAFFIRE Legal or its attorneys and should not be considered legal advice. And now, here's your host, founder and principal attorney at SAFFIRE Legal, Teresa McQueen.
Thank you, James, and welcome everyone to Workplace Perspective, where we are striving to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere. During our holiday break, we wanted to share with you a replay of a terrific interview from our inaugural podcast. At the end of September 2017, I interviewed attorney Tina Rad of the Wagner Law firm about the Department of Fair Employment and Housing's newly published guidelines on conducting effective workplace investigations. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on the interview, and the topic remains relevant and as important as ever. So stay with us to hear Tina's thoughts on choosing investigators, investigation standards, the role of HR in the investigation process, and some key takeaways. It's going to be a great show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective do not necessarily reflect those of SAFFIRE Legal or its attorneys and should not be considered legal advice. You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast presented by SAFFIRE Legal.
Welcome to Workplace Perspective, Tina, and thank you for joining me today to help round out today's podcast on workplace training. Today, Tina and I are going to be talking about the newly released Workplace Harassment Guide put out by the Department of Fair Employment and Housing for California employers. But before we jump into that, Tina, why don't you tell our listeners a bit about Wagner Law and your legal background?
Thanks, Teresa, for having me on.